In this week's chapter of Bleach, Nemu decides to unleash her godlike power in order to protect her father and creator, Mayuri Koratsuchi, and she's gonna sacrifice her very soul to do so. It was only a matter of time before we get a little bit more backstory on the character of Nemu, otherwise known as Nemori Nanago, and we do get it in this week's chapter. But on the upside, we also get some pretty badass action this week when we get to see her going all freaking ham against Pernita Parkinjaz. Yep, this week's chapter was pretty freaking exciting. It was also pretty heavy-handed material, especially at the very beginning of the chapter, when we get to learn a little bit more about Nemu and her past, and how actually she was created. Apparently, she was a part of this Nemori project, which was used to create this ultimate being from these godlike cells, and she was the 7th production of this group, and she was the most successful, and that's because, unlike the other test subjects, which barely even took human form, aside from one small child which died, she actually lived on, evolved, and became the daughter of Mayuri Koratsuchi. What I find most fascinating and very complex about this week's chapter is really how Mayuri actually views his daughter Nemu. Just the fact that he decides to call her by that name is a really interesting choice. Not only that, but he also happens to be very embarrassed over the fact that she herself is actually literally turning into his daughter. He seems to want to only see her as simply a test subject, but little by little she's developing into one hell of a warrior who simply wants to protect her father. As Mayuri Koratsuchi put it in this week's chapter, Nemu is in many ways sort of living in a dream, and living through his dream in a way. The opening parts of the chapter are pretty heavy-handed, but luckily the second half of the chapter is full-on action, where we get to see Nemu just going completely insane. She literally seems like a character out of Dragon Ball Z in this week's chapter, because she immediately starts attacking the giant Pernita arm, which is clasping down on Mayuri Koratsuchi, and she just completely blasts right through this thing. Its entire hand just explodes into a flurry of blood as its fingers are flying all over the place, and she manages to save her master. It's at this point that she decides to take over in the battle, and Mayuri reluctantly is going to allow her to do this as well. He never believed that his daughter would be the one who would actually fight in his stead, but it definitely happens in this week's chapter, and she does the ultimate sacrifice while attacking Pernita. She uses this big, giant, devastating attack, which is known as the Gikan Jirinju, which actually allows her to sacrifice a part of her soul, to be exact about 6%, so that she can launch this big, massive attack, which just completely obliterates the Pernita arm, causing it to twist and contort on itself, and ultimately, hopefully, it will defeat this thing. But damn, Nemu is freaking powerful. Just the way they actually drew her this week. I gotta give a lot of credit to the artwork, because this week's chapter had some amazing panels. I especially love as she's getting down on the ground and then she just explodes up into the air, crashing right into the hand. It's really freaking impactful, and one of the coolest scenes that I've actually seen from Nemu. Nay, it's definitely, I think, her crowning achievement from the series. So what's the rundown on this week's chapter of Bleach? A very simple but very good chapter. We got that Nemu backstory, and we got some amazing action at the very end of this week's chapter with some really good artwork, which this week just looked really great all around. The expressions from Nemu when she looked all pissed off, just the look of her as she's flying through the air, destroying the Pernita hands, and that big final panel where she's launching the Gikan Jirinju looks so freaking awesome, just so devastatingly powerful. And I always love when you have characters who are real timid and in the background, and then suddenly they unleash this godlike, Kenpachi-like power, which is incredibly destructive. It's very shocking. But then, of course, there's all of the backstory at the very beginning of the chapter, which I think is handled really well. It was pretty heavy-handed and a little hard to read at first, but I got a pretty good understanding of it, just learning that indeed she is a part of this big project. She's the 7th version of these people that they're trying to create, and it is really interesting to note that the first couple didn't even take on a human form, and the first time they actually had a human, it never got past the stages of being a baby. It wasn't until they actually got to Nemu that she finally started to develop and evolve as a person, and that's a really big theme from this week's chapter. So all in all, that's really all I have to say about this week's chapter of Bleach, which honestly I believe was really good. It was a little slow in the first half, but the backstory was really good and it had some amazing themes. We get to learn a little bit more about Nemu and where she came from and what her true relationship with Mayuri is really like. We got a few more flashbacks flashbacks with Mayuri as well, showing us another one of his weird, creepy looks. He's always going through different changes in every single arc. And of course that action scene at the end, which was just plain badass. Really one of the coolest scenes that I've seen from this arc, and like I said, I think the coolest moment from Nemu from the entire series. So, should you check out this week's chapter? Hell freaking yes! This is definitely going to be a great end to this battle, although there could be another twist here. Could this be the end of Pernita? Is he going to have another ability? Is another arm going to pop up? There's no guarantee that after destroying these hands, if they're simply just going to lay there and die, they might actually regenerate or even turn into something worse. We're just going to have to wait and read. What I will say is this week's chapter was pretty damned entertaining, a little slow in the first half. Despite that, it had everything going for it. Good backstory, awesome action, and some pretty awesome artwork. So I'm going to give this week's chapter a 4 out of 5. Check it out, Bleach fans. If you are fans of the anime series or you're currently reading the manga version, you gotta check out this week's chapter. It's pretty freaking exciting. Before you guys leave today, I want to hear your thoughts about this week's chapter of Bleach, and you can tell me in the comments section below. What did you think about the backstory of Nemu? Do you have any theories about it? And what did you think about that big action scene at the end when she unleashed that crazy ability which allowed her to sacrifice a piece of her soul to attack Pernita? And please tell me what you hope to see from the rest of the Bleach manga series. Thank you guys for watching my review. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, follow us on social media, and check out our weekly podcast show. This week's episode was really cool. We got to interview Rob Paulsen, who is a legendary voice actor who has voiced literally hundreds of classic cartoon characters. Just to name a few, he's the current voice of Donatello from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, but he's also voiced Yakko Warner from Animaniacs and Pinky from Pinky and the Brain, and like I said, hundreds of others. So make sure to check that out. Also, I'm going to give a shameless plug-in to a brand new series that I am doing. I am doing 100 Star Wars videos for 100 days, all leading up to the release of Star Wars The Force Awakens. That is no joke. Every day, there is going to be a video, so make sure to stay tuned for those. I've already released the first 2. There's another one coming out today. The first one's an introduction video. The second one is all about Darth Vader. I do a big discussion about him, just talking about his backstory and what I think is really cool about that character, so make sure to check those out. Thank you guys again for watching, and as always, stay dandy, baby.